of the Grid Path launch, that is the panel discussion. May I request the panelists for this session to turn on their videos, please? Mr. Narasimhan, Mr. Gupta, Mr. Menghani, and Mr. Pandit. Srihari and I will be moderating this panel discussion. We are very, very pleased to have a very eminent set of panelists with us. They really do not require introduction. Most of them have over 3 decades of experience in the power sector in India, and they're very, very familiar names to the Indian audience. But for those who are not familiar, I'll just do a very, very brief introduction. Mr. Narasimhan is the Director of System Operations at POSOCO. He's been in the power sector in some form or other for over 30 years, earlier as part of Power Grid, and when POSOCO was separated, part of POSOCO. We have Mr. Gupta, who is the Chief Engineer of the Integrated Resource Planning Division within the Central Electricity Authority. He has been in charge of a recent model that CEA did for 2030 for India with the Ordena platform, and we are really pleased that he's here and he can share his insights from that modeling exercise. We have Mr. Menghani, who is the Chief of Engineering at the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. He was also the Joint Chief 5 years ago there, and he's also had a long and distinguished career with the Central Electricity Authority, where he was formerly the Chief Engineer for Renewable Energy and Grid Integration. Finally, we have Mr. Ajit Pandit, who is the CEO and founder of IDAM Infra Consulting. He's a very, very well-known figure in the Indian power sector, very, very closely associated with many state governments, Government of India, and regulators across the country, and advising them in various consulting forms. So once again, thank you for all of you to join us for this panel discussion. We have close to 100 participants still there. That really shows us the level of interest. And you know, these 2 days we've launched GridPath. We hope more people will use it. We have other modeling groups as well. The whole point of all these modeling exercises is finally to inform policy, to have better planning, to have lesser risks, more reliability, and lesser cost. So it finally comes down to, you know, how do we use modeling for better planning, and how important it is in today's era that we do really detailed modeling. So the format of the panel discussion is going to be this. I will first request all panelists to make their opening comments, say about 5 to 6 minutes. And then I will ask my colleague Srihari to begin with a few questions that we have in mind. And finally, we will take a few questions from the audience. We will collate them for paucity of time. So please type in your questions as well in the Q&A as the session goes on. So I will request the panelists in this order. First, Mr. Narasimhan, then Mr. Gupta, then Mr. Menghani, and then finally, Mr. Pandit. So can I request Mr. Narasimhan to begin his opening comments for 5 to 6 minutes? Thank you.
Yeah, good morning, friends. Good morning to all the distinguished panelists and the team from Prayas, Dr. Anna Miliva and Dr. Ranjit Deshmukh, and a very esteemed audience. We have a lot of experts in the audience too, I'm seeing. So thanks for giving me this opportunity to be part of this panel. And I would also like to thank Dr. Anna and Dr. Ranjit Deshmukh for the excellent presentations over the last 2 days. In fact, such studies are really required considering the huge stake involved, you know, and the number of stakeholders that we have. So I would only, in my opening remarks, cover 3 broad areas. One is just completing the entire modeling and simulation spectrum. The second is that while we are doing such studies, it's always important to have some sense of proportion in the whole thing, so for a better appreciation. And the third is, how do we convert the results from these studies to reality? That's the third issue. So coming to the first, you know, Dr. Ranjit gave a very excellent slide covering all the studies which are generally required, starting from optimal capacity expansion, production cost modeling, the power flow studies, and the stability studies. So just to complete that, I thought that since electricity is generally a very small component of the entire energy pie, So of course, the optimal capacity expansion does have some inputs from the policy side, which are exogenously fed. But it's important considering that, like optimal energy mix, those studies also are equally important, and that should be the starting point for any optimal capacity expansion for the electricity sector. We are talking about discussions in India as well as the rest of the world. It's entirely on electrification of the economy, how more and more things are electrified. But we also have to appreciate that 1 million ton of oil equivalent, if it has to be electrified, then you need at least 5 to 6 gigawatts of solar PV. Uh, definitely, and that would have an impact on the demand also. Like there were questions on, of course, demand forecast is the starting point of the whole exercise. So that becomes very important. So electrification has a bearing and on demand forecasts. And similarly, we also have other pronouncements such as the gas share would go up from 6 to 15%. Okay. Now that again has a bearing on, like how much of it would get translated into additional gas generation. Would the other industry and transportation sectors alone consume this 6 to 15% increase, or would the gas generation also get impacted? Because that has a bearing on all the modeling and simulation. So that's the uh, so optimal energy mix should be the starting point for before we talk of capacity expansion modeling. Now another issue, so that's at the top, and then Ranjit concluded with stability studies, but essentially with more and more of renewable generation, uh, the discussion is more on electromagnetic transients. Like these power flow and stability studies still talk about a three-phase representation, but electromagnetic transients is also becoming important with more and more power electronic devices, and that's also quite computationally intensive. So unlike power flow and stability where we're able to run thousands of contingencies, in electromagnetic transients we'll be able to do very few contingencies. So that's the other side. So whatever the four studies which Ranjit showed, they would essentially be sandwiched between optimal energy mix and electromagnetic transients on the other side. So that's the first area. The second issue is that when I talk about the sense of proportion in all that we are doing, optimal capacity expansion, we all know, covers both fixed costs as well as variable costs. And if you are looking at the generation and transmission today in India, the amount involved is something like 5 lakh crores or 5 trillion rupees. Okay. If you're talking about generation and transmission alone. And if we do an optimal capacity expansion, let's say we are able to save 5%, that translates into 25,000 crores. So that's the kind of money, the savings which are there through this. And if we don't do optimal capacity expansion, do only a production cost simulation, still we are looking at something like 2 trillion rupees or 2 lakh crores of worth of fuel, where even a 5% savings would translate into 10,000 crores. Okay, so that's the kind of money. And if we don't do all this and still talk about only ancillary services or market-based ancillary services, the ancillary services is a very niche market, just about 10,000 crores. Even if we talk about competition and a 5% saving would mean 500 crores. So you have 25,000 crores from optimal capacity expansion, which comes down to 10,000 and then 500 crores. So we need to work on all the three. I'm not saying that one area alone is enough, but all three are important, but it's important to know where we get maximum savings. And that's the reason why the optimal capacity expansion studies are so very important. And the third area which I mentioned is how do we translate all this to reality? Okay. So let's say the optimal capacity expansion gives you a 300 gigawatt solar target. Okay, what does it mean? Would it mean that that should be the basis for MNRE and SECI to carry out bids? Uh, or let's say even gas, let's say it talks about 40 gigawatt of gas capacity. how would we do the bidding? There must be some um, sequence in which the different activities are there, so that whatever results that's there in the optimal capacity expansion, it gets translated to reality through your competitive bidding process. So that's the one area. Or let's say some of the simulations also show a 3% curtailment in RE. Okay, but are we factoring all that in the new solar and wind PPAs? That's also becomes very important, and we might need to have a graded system of RE curtailment mentioned in the PPA itself, so that you have enough flexibility in the system. Now, another important thing what we have been observing is that all such studies, they only talk about whatever results that come out. It's the DC solar panel capacity with 21 to 22% typical capacity utilization factor. But in the last 2 years, we have actually seen at the interstate transmission system, whatever new solar and wind is coming, we are having 26 to 28% CUF due to higher number of solar panels being installed. Now that would mean a 5% increase in CUF means a lot, both for RE curtailment as well as the thermal or coal-fired plant load factors. So that's very important, how when we convert these results to reality. And fourth, of course, like in this conversion to reality, let's say solar, we are having an increasing number of solar plus storage tenders also, and their co-location and other, that becomes very important. Like in the model, it should be flexible enough. If the storage is co-located, then we have a disadvantage that will not be able to charge during night hours when there is no solar. So it's important that these results also inform the policymakers that do we need co-located storage or independent storage? Okay, so these are some of the issues. So these are the three areas we could discuss on this. And of course, the other questions such as the institutional arrangements for such studies and capacity building, we could dwell on these later. Thank you so much. I hand it over now.
Thank you, Mr. Narasimhan. Can I request Mr. Gupta to go on?
Yeah. Thanks, Ashin. It was a very nice presentation given by Dr. Anna and Ranjit. Happy to see you, Dr. Ranjit, after a very long time. I think we met during the greening the grid studies in Osaka, if I am not mistaken. Uh, uh, as you know, that CA is involved since beginning. They are doing these generation expansion studies since long, because we have been mandated to prepare national electricity plan, which we brought out every 5 years. And we were using a lot of modeling computer models from the beginning. Way back in 1995, we received one model, computer model. But presently we are using Ordina, as Mr. Ashwin told you. And we have brought out one study which is basically the first step towards these kind of studies. And we have brought out for the year 2930 what will be the optimal generation mix. And during these studies, we learned a lot of things. And I must appreciate that the grid path which you have shown, I was not fully, I have not seen the full presentation, but some of the things which are very, which I liked was that battery, basically we had a lot of problems while modeling batteries, because there is a power component and the energy component. And I think if I have understood correctly, the model, your grid path, you can give both power and energy separately costs, so that it can select the sizing. Because in our studies, we had to run several scenarios to find out what will be the best power to energy ratio. Uh, so that was so like this. If I would like to mention that there are a lot of good points which we have, which we were missing while doing studies in Ordina, like RPO obligation you can define, externally, then there is a carbon cap is always there. But just my one question is that can you model more number of pollutants like SOx, NOx, and fly ash constraints? Can you model that? That was my one this thing. Then it was a good point that planning reserve margin can be externally defined in the model, because we were giving somehow we were trying to model that, but we were not fully successful in that. Uh, Hurdle rate, that was also a good facility which Dr. Ranjit beautifully had explained. Uh, in regard to the modeling exercise, I think it is a very important exercise which helps us policymakers to take proper decisions. And I think the major work of modeler is basically to tell the policymakers the incoming technologies. Like when we started our studies, battery energy storage was not seen as a one of the technological option which can be uh, taken in the future. But now, after the studies, when we had lot of studies results, people start appreciating that the battery energy storage systems can also play a very important role. And as the costs are coming down, we must start planning battery energy storage systems. In regard to the models, see, we have been working with now 5 models. We have been in collaboration with LBNL. They are using Plexus. We are having Indo-Denmark collaboration where we are using Balmoral. Then we have G. World Bank is working with G. They have another model. Then Ordina, of course, we have already Ordina we have, and now GridPath. So all these models are there, but all these models, we can say that some facilities are good in some models and like that. But the major problem is of the resource, computing resource. That is becoming a very big issue, because in when we were doing Ordina studies, we were having a good server, but even then it was taking so much time to solve. So we had to compromise on lot of things to get the results faster. So simulation time, because as you go on adding the facilities, simulation time is exponentially increased, and that people lose interest. So that should be, we should keep in mind that thing, that simulation time should be the least uh, in the modeling. Because what I have experienced with the states, initially they start very enthusiastically, but suddenly they lose interest because the model is giving results in maybe in 2 days or 3 days, and suddenly they realize that this input was wrong. So that is my one important thing one should keep in mind before this. Yeah, I think that's all from me.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Can I request Mr. Menghani to make his opening comments?
Thank you very much, Dr. Ashwin, Ranjit Deshmukh sir, Narasimhanji, Shri Hari sir to invite me. I am seeing a lot of good participation, lot of mentors of mine in the panel and also in the participants. But I will thank Ms. Anna and Ranjit Deshmukh to create an open source software. Why I am telling this? Because I have never worked directly on these things, but whenever I search things to cost inhibition, I was not able to learn. This gives me opportunity to make this all planning process very transparent. What we have done, open source software, we can involve lot many people from research community, student community, and some people which are not yet initiated in the planning exercise. This capability of breaking the black box and capacity planning is given by Miss Anna. So I will tell her that except earlier I am considering Thomas Spencer of Terry as my mentor. Now I consider Ranjit and Anna also my Sherpa in my journey to learn the capacity expansion planning outside my original work. And for regulatory framework, I I'm finding this great path is giving me a lot of opportunity, not for my own learning, but for capacity building of my own staff. What was happening for all things, we have to depend upon consultant or external sources. With these resources, we can do our own exercise in capacity building, subjected to that sufficient data is made available to us in transparently. What is the challenges we are facing in integrated resource planning? When I returned to the CA in 2015, we considered whether in the open market or de-licenses market, whether this type of national electricity plan is required or not. But in last 10-year experience tell me it is now much more needed that more than one capacity planning study came into the market which challenge each other by making different type of assumption, different type of scenario, because three things are changing very rapidly. One is our market, then we have created a robust transmission system, and there is a very fluid policy framework. Suddenly in 2014, some drastic change or disruption change come in the policy. So how to cope up with these challenges? Only through a good capacity planning software can tell us. And what we are assuming, we are taking a lot of risk when we do capacity planning study at CE. Something which is not in my control, I am assuming all these things, like renewable generation capacity, how much it will come, how much will be the demand, and who will bear the cost of all these deviation. In CRC, lot of challenges we are having from stakeholders. One thing which is recently troubling us, creation of some non-performing asset. Earlier it was only in the generation side. Now also in the transmission side, people are saying we have built up a lot of capacity. So there are both sides of risk. Whether we should provide for a scarcity pricing mechanism through a capacity planning mechanism, or we overbuild the system and bear the cost for few early year and later we can find a better utilization. So there is nothing which can be predicted initially. What we are doing, we are assuming a perfect market condition. But within few years, we find that this perfect market condition is broken by the policy framework. Both our federal government and state government has lot of flexibility. That flexibility is coming from not only the day-to-day daily power procurement planning, all the decision of long-term power procurement plans are being taken without taking total consideration of efficiency and optimization. So how to incorporate all these sudden changes in capacity planning? So that's why I am not in the favor of this 5-year or 10-year of study. One thing is clear, if you have to forecast, you should forecast frequently. Every year changes are happening in everything. From renewable side, suddenly a regulator changed my net metering criteria. It will affect my money planning exercise. Suddenly new transmission system are built in the power system which change the power flows. So every year I will require. So I cannot go for a big model like Plexo, etc., which require lot of computing time, etc. To show results, I need some open source software through which many people can do the study in IITs, in various research institutes, so that they can bring out openly. My constraint is that my DISCOM fellow or my transmission fellow or my planner at the central level will not speak truth due to certain constraint in transparency. But these are the framework like Prayas or student community or research community, they can immediately pinpoint where we are deviating from an efficient planning outcome. So this is giving me a good opportunity through a variable cost. But my past experience says that what is my requirement? First is clearly I tell you the generation and transmission are not co-optimized. It has becoming a sequential planning exercise. What we are doing, first we plan generation, and then after 1 year a transmission plan come up. And this perspective transmission plan is remain in books. Somewhere generator came and generator asked me a system to be built as per LTA. But I have not factored that generator initially because what is happening in 2015-16, out of this 175 gigawatt, we are not sure about location. There was not clarity where the plant will come, or even we do not know where the plant are existing. So whatever flows, etc., we are planning, we are basing all the basis of some Excel type of planning, where we assume certain location, etc., or based on the potential, we do the study. Only recently we are able to create such type of databases where actual plant location, etc., can be found. But still in the potential area, we are lacking full-fledged geographical mapping. I will give you one example. One planning exercise goes for 1 year based on potential. But later when we reach at that particular location, wind potential was there, but there was no land. In another area, Gujarat was telling us why you are planning all the substation at one location while we have spare land available at the Kutch. So integrated resource planning does not mean only the power sector resources. All the other resources like land, farmers' position, etc., need to be inbuilt into our system. Then in critical, one area is that all our planning exercise consider inelastic demand. We are not considering the demand curve. We all know that demand is being curtailed on commercial reason also. So why not we can build up the curtailment pricing of demand as well as curtailment price of renewable in our planning exercise, so that we can know that how much power pricing can go. All the investment is not like Mr. Narasimhan is saying ancillary power. I will say for a portfolio generator, all type of products are required to recover the cost. It is not necessary that my cost will be recovered through energy only. I mean, how many days I will be ready to accept the price spike? This is not clear. So unless I built in all these parameters of demand curtailment or value of loss load in our planning exercise, generator is not sure that whether his total recovery or cash flow for 25 years is ensured. And then comes the ancillary service market. At present, ancillary service market is administrative price mechanism. We are trying since last 3-4 years to bring about the market-based ancillary service. It will bring efficiency both for the customer and also for the generator, which are already standard. So unless reserve co-optimization is also built in our planning exercise, like I am seeing in your model, it is facilitated that the reserves can be co-optimized also. So this will give us a clear-cut idea to the generator how many times his total portfolio can be sold. So there should be a penalty mechanism for shortfall in modeling also, like I am saying RPS. But if in RPS, if the particular state is not following RPS, if I put up a penalty clause, then my scheduling of renewable will be different, rather than simple saying that I will accept the curtailment. So this type of final thing has to be done. And another thing happened. Since 5 years, I am searching that whether we have made a small mistake in 2010, that transmission charges were exempted for solar, but that exemption for 5 megawatt. But since 2014, this has been applied for 175 gigawatt of renewable. So on renewable cost, I am not imposing the transmission cost and only getting the variable cost of this plant in as zero in my capacity building plan. So how much efficient planning I am doing? Another case, when everybody finds that I do capacity planning or operational planning on variable cost, some smart generator came. What he has done, he shifted his 50% variable cost into the fixed cost and get a 25-year contract because he wants the certainty in merit order operation. So how these type of things can be handled in our system. So transmission cost allocation is also an important factor in my optimum transmission system. What has happened, say, consider the case of Rajasthan. If I withdraw this transmission exemption, the benefit of the bad side will go. But due to taking only for this benefit, I lose the advantage of distributed resources. I sacrificed all my good and better sides only to get this exemption and considered my all generation in Rajasthan and Gujarat. So policy is playing a very important role in all power planning exercise. And this policy is not only due to a government change. It happened everywhere, not only this location of the generator, even the transmission side planning, siting, capacity, everything is defined by a particular policy or a particular framework. So these things affect my total financial cost. And next is the impact of derivative market, because due to lack of derivative market, my distribution companies are not able to project their requirement or to going to the market. all they are committing themselves to the same formula which are used in 2005. Just multiply your peak capacity, peak demand by 1.3 and make that much contract. So how this derivative market will affect the transmission optimum cost planning, that is also important. And then we are implementing some small changes in marketing system. In 2000, we have adopted decentralized operation. But later we find that by a simple exercise of security cost and economic dispatch, lot of money can be saved. So we have to balance the market and administrative side of power system operation also in our planning system. So it is basically an incentive exercise. My state discoms, my state transmission company, my load dispatcher, generator, all have certain incentive paradigm. How I can manage in this our optimum transmission or capacity planning, that is also much required. And also new challenges are coming, like climate change. Just in the month of July or August in this year, we have a 40% shortfall in wind generation. Whether this type of resilience is built into our system, one cyber security events can be also a particular scenario. So for my friends in CA, we have a lot of challenging exercise to do in planning. And I find them very courageous people. When in 2014, MNRE was asking for option 1, 2, 3 as 175 gigawatt. They come up with a 3-option scenario. And it gives us a very good idea that in the uncertainty area, we cannot build for a single scenario. All the uncertainty need to be built in our transmission planning, etc., or in capacity planning. How I am finding this resource is very good. That using this resource, I can find a recourse. After 3 years or 4 years, if my certain renewable capacity do not came, how I will change my planning process? What is happening due to the thermal overhang? Every year I am shifting my storage. And now it will not come in 2020. Now it will not come in 2025. It will not come in 29. So when it will come, it should not happen that like solar in storage also we lag. So in storage also annual studies are required. So your grid path will help lot of us making us the yearly scenario of variation which is happening every year. So I will thank the team of Blue Analytics and Prayas for bringing us this great product since last 1 month. I am also trying to use it. I am forking it already on the GitHub and trying to see that how I can build the data. Only constant I am not having a good load profile, generation profile available in public domain. It is only when the government initiated certain study or some foreign institute is involved, then this data is available. Why not we can make this data available to everybody, certain data which is available for study for all research community, because they will challenge my planning process. They will hold my hand to prevent me from doing a mistake. So I will request POSOCO to share more and more data, because in every forum, people are looking toward POSOCO to share all possible data in all granularity which is possible to make all the effort which are being done by Prayas or any other body in transmission and generation planning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Menghani. Can I request Mr. Pandit now to make his opening comments in 5 minutes?
Thank you, Ashwin and Prayas team. First, for inviting me and giving me this opportunity to be part of this eminent panel, and also like to recognize and acknowledge the presence of eminent personalities on the audience, Dr. Deva Ramanathan sir, Suni sir, and Ranjit and Dr. Ranjit and Dr. Anna. Compliments to you for the very comprehensive overview about grid path, and more specifically about this initiative to bringing in the energy modeling into a doorstep, or should I say at the desktop of every energy enthusiast in that sense. So it's a very a very commendable initiative. Now I'll try to cover my points within 5 minutes in the initial opening remark. As we all know, particularly in the last decade, the nature of the grid resources, whether it's a generation, transmission, or a load, has undergone transformation, and it's still changing at a very fast pace. So under the circumstances, the perspective that we need to and like to talk about is from the user or a state perspective. how they would like to actually see this scenario emerging going forward. And in that sense, and what are their expectations from this such kind of a energy modeling exercise, and where it could actually fit in into the entire overall planning exercise and horizon by the different stakeholders. And I talk about, Mr. Narsingh talked about 3 ideas. I will talk about the 4 Ps about energy modeling expectation. And then the first P is about the participation and the public participation in this entire exercise and the stakeholder participation. So first P is about the participation. The entire exercise about the modeling, the outputs would make eminent sense for all the stakeholders if they are actually involved in the entire process of even building up of the assumptions and then the modeling assumptions that go along. For example, since we are talking about a large number of RE developers and RE generators, and then the scenario is changing fast. So far, what I understand are the exercises with the state level planners or at the central level, to great extent, the DISCOMs and the state generators are involved in the process, or through coordination committees at the state level. But the private sector generators, as well as the RE generators, as well as a couple of the private DISCOMs, their involvement in terms of not only just feeding in data, but also in terms of evaluating the most optimal capacity planning exercise, that could go a long way in terms of building a robust model exercise. First and foremost, in fact, a couple of assumptions about, even for the state generators, the assumptions about the loadability criteria, technical minimum, or the ramp up ramp down rating. So validation of all those inputs is something which is very essential, and through stakeholder participation in this process would go a long way in terms of establishing a credibility about this entire modeling exercise. So the participation is the first important P I would like to flag. Second important P is actually about the performance test of the model, or the pendulum test of the model, as I would say. And there were questions about the resilience, and any model should be able to actually withstand the range of scenarios and the swings that it can actually throw up. And it's more so important in the current changing environment we're talking about, with a very high RE penetration in the low demand scenario, or the extreme weather condition scenarios. How would the actually model would throw up the results? Then we are talking about the AG load shift. We are talking about the changing patterns on the demand side to great extent, with the high level penetration of the DRE resources. The EV penetration is expected. The kind of horizons of planning that we're talking about, the grid is going to have a significant changes. So the scenario building, and then discussing about and putting all the scenarios in the public domain, and having a fair discussion and deliberations around those scenarios would go a long way. So the swing test and the performance test of the model would actually help itself, building in confidence about all stakeholders, and more so the policymakers, regulators, and then the users of that model in that sense. So that's the second P test is the most crucial and important to certify the resilience of the outputs that we are talking about. Third P is about periodicity of this, the model. It's not just a one-time exercise, or, although there are grid code provisions which talks about the perspective plan and the 5-year plans, and then the annual rolling plans, and those exercises take place. But, as Mr. Mengani just mentioned, there is an element of, a disconnect at times when you try to look at it from the regulatory process of, approvals of CapEx, as well as approval of the generation resource procurement approvals, the competitive bidding, the tender process approvals by the regulators. So what all these inputs can actually feed into this exercise would go a long way for the regulatory process to take informed decisions in terms of what kind of capacity when the procurement decisions are to be made, the long-term or medium-term procurement decisions are to be made by the regulator, or in terms of even the reserve requirement, or we are discussing about the resource adequacy as well as the planning reserve margins. Now, these are the requirements which will be spelled out by the regulator, specified by the regulator. But what are the tools which are available at the hands of the regulator? And I think this tool would definitely make an eminent sense for the regulator And in that sense, the periodicity of this exercise to make it to be relevant going forward is very important. So at the time of the MYT process, the control period beginning, or at the mid-course review process, every time this exercise will have to be re-undertaken to validate and to have a course correction exercise to be undertaken. So the periodicity of this exercise is extremely important in my mind. That's the third P. And then the fourth P that I would like to actually also refer to in terms of the pricing interlinkages, the fourth P for the pricing interlinkages, because there are a lot of assumptions around the pricing framework and about the gas pricing, the availability of gas, or the coal pricing, the imported coal availability, the assumptions about the the storage as well as RE prices, what kind of, at what scale and at what rate we are expecting, significant reduction in those prices. That would actually have an influence on the entire assumptions and the scenarios that will throw up. Another important issue is about also which is not much talked about, is also in terms of transmission pricing. Although we did talk about a couple of hurdle rate, and particularly since states would look at it as a exercise, the entire POC pricing framework for the transmission at the national as well as state level. We are now discussing the new framework which is already rolled out by the Central Commission. But we'll have to see the implication and impact of that. And then the fourth on the pricing is part of the reactive pricing, because we expect actually the generator resources to also contribute to a reactive compensation requirement of the grid. So all this will have an interplay with the entire exercise of modeling. So from this, for key takeaway for me is that if the any model which will have to address the participation requirement, the second is about the pendulum test or performance test of the model, the periodicity part of the modeling exercise, and the last but not the least, the pricing interconnections, the interlinkages in the modeling exercise. So these are the important things, and the users with the open source based platform would be really geared up, and we'll have as many number of, because the same problem, the different from different perspective will actually help us and only strengthen the regulatory and policy making process in the long run. So compliments to your team, and I'll stop here for the opening remarks. Back to you, Ashwin.
Thank you, Ajit. I will start off the next round of the panel discussion. I will be addressing questions to specific panelists, but I would request all the panelists to jump in as needed if they have a comment to make. Starting with Mr. Menghani, just wanted to, if you can elaborate a little bit more on how the policy and regulatory processes can evolve or be strengthened to ensure greater use of modeling in sort of furthering the evidence-based decision making in both the policy and regulatory spaces. Can you please comment on that?
Actually, like Mr. Ajit Pandit has also told, that in all our procurement decision on approval exercise, we are not referring to national electricity plan. Like say one particular state is approving a new generating station, thermal generating station for 25 years. First, my national electricity plan should have a clear idea that whether this plant is required or not, or for particular state also. What we are doing at a national level, we are doing a study, but we are not clearly mentioning that at what particular year and how much period this power will be available and how much will be the surplus. Like the example of Punjab, or only for the paddy season, he has created a capacity for 5 months. So my planning exercise never gave him a clear-cut idea beforehand that for these 5 months sufficient capacity will be available. I have seen a lot of regulatory order for approval of tariff. Never I find a reference of national electricity transmission plan. But I find my political leaders are very accurately using my 18th EPS or 19th EPS or national electricity plan. Whenever they have to make a green note sheet for a procurement plan, they will give the 19 EPS data which was over projected and make a good case that this power plant is required. And based on that, all approvals are given. So at the regulator level, before giving approval for the competitive bidding or whether giving the approval of the tariff, this should be thoroughly gone into the case whether this particular power plant is required or not. So we must study, refer our transmission national electricity plan and national transmission plan to validate all the procurement decision. This is not happening anywhere, not at the any state level. This is happening. All procurement decisions are taken based on certain Excel file where by making certain scenario changes in one cell, you can make your state surplus or shortage for 5 years, for next 5 years at least. And all the decisions are taken only considering next 5 years. In all planning exercise, it is not visible. Like consider the case of storage. If I go for a storage, whether this storage will be useful or after 10 years or 8 years, this will remain underutilized. For a lot of HVDC capacity. After 3 years or 4 years, what is my planning? Certain HVDC assets become underutilized even after 5 years. And now we are having no use of that. So there is no long-term visibility coming after these 5 years of the national plan. I will request that even at the cost of mistakes, let us plan for a set of 25 years, show the visibility of utilization of each asset for 25 years or at least for 12 years till their debt is recovered. Unless this is done and this is validated by the regulator, this type of work building will keep on happening. So for regulator, some inside capacity building is also necessary. What is happening? All the utilities has a better information than the regulator. They have so much good data available, but the regulator is depending upon limited resources for data. So the regulator should build its own capacity, like so this grid platform for collecting data at regular interval, 15-minute data. Regulator can himself create a capacity. And Ajit Pandit sir have witnessed that how much the inside capacity in the UP Electricity Regulatory Commission, etc. Only certain good regulatory commission like Maharashtra has good internal capacity to evaluate a proposal. All other are depending upon external agency. So we have to have the inbuilt capacity building and all these tools. I will ask my friend Ranjit, etc. to trouble one more time to teach my regulatory staff also. Unless my capacity is building, I cannot judge a case in 60 days. If a crores rupees of investment is happening and I am asked to approve the tariff in 60 days, simply, honestly, I cannot assess unless I have previous background and previous study available. So this will be a great useful tool.
Thank you, Mr. Mengani.
I just
think,
like to add, if
yes,
you
please
permit.
go ahead.
See,
Please.
national electricity plan we are making for the national level. If states are doing their own planning, they look only the state, and we are looking at the national level. So when you project your capacity statewide and you add up, it will be much more than what is actually required, because you don't need the resources. Some resources are complementary. So that is the main aim. Of course, yeah, I agree with Mr. Meghani that these exercises need to be the periodicity should be good. Otherwise, what happens that if you lose, if you come out with something 5 years after 5 years, then you have so many different technologies and different things which makes your plan haywire. Another aspect which he has touched is that the time limitation of 60 days in tariff, because these type of studies cannot be, I think, completed in just 2 months. It takes a lot of time to collect data, and then initially you need a lot of time to do these kind of studies. And another most important thing is that as the generation is delicensed, we don't know where the plant will come. And whenever we plan, that plant doesn't come after 2 years or 3 years, and our transmission planning goes haywire. So I don't know how we can help in that fashion, because being delicensed, anybody can put any plant anywhere. And states, I have a feeling that states wants to put up their own plants rather than rely on some other resources, and that also makes the things complex. Thanks.
Yes, Srihari, I
Yes.
just had a quick comment on this policy and regulatory framework, which would encourage that these type of studies are done periodically by different bodies. On that, of course, when it comes to energy, we don't have a energy law or an energy policy. The Niti Aayog draft of 2017, it still remains a draft. So on the energy side, we don't have. But coming to the electricity side, we do have like CA and CRC. They are empowered to make regulations on various issues, And on the planning, I had one particular observation. The CRC did come out with a regulation on transmission planning. Okay, what all the periodicity and the studies that would be conducted, and they left it to the CTU to evolve a detailed procedure on how this would be done. But there's some amount of difference of opinion at that stage. Like the CA, the planning, the CA did feel that planning is exclusively the jurisdiction of CA and CTO and the commission. So probably the CA themselves could come out with regulations. The national XT plan is there in the act. Okay, but if you're talking about these type of optimal capacity expansion, like the CA did it out of their own interest, right? There's no mandate as such. In the last few years, we have never had CA come out with an optimal capacity expansion. So they did it out of their own interest in looking at the requirement. Okay, but if it is made part of a CA regulation, exhaustive on optimal capacity expansion, production cost modeling in different time horizons, the CRC themselves could come out. Like in the grid code, draft grid code, we did try to cover this to some extent. So if we have to do something in the operational time horizon, let this be prescribed in the grid code, we would do it. Already the security constraint economic dispatch we have done as per the commission order. So increasing that time horizon is not an issue. So both CA as well as CRC, in their own regulations, they could come out with the need for such studies and who would do what. And similarly, at the intra-state level, the SCRCs could come out.
Just to add to what Mr. Narasimhan said, we are trying to put optimal generation mix in the national electricity policy. We are finalizing the draft, and in draft we are trying that optimal generation mix should be included. And I think it has been included. Maybe it is still at the draft, but we have included that.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta and Mr. Narasimhan, for intervening. I just wanted to move on to a little slightly different topic, which is what we have sort of discussed, and some of the opening remarks also mentioned this, which is the different types of models or modeling exercises that are needed to basically cover different time frames or different aspects of the planning or the modeling. So my question to Mr. Gupta is, what types of modeling exercises do you see are needed by policymakers and regulators to better aid them in planning? We've already talked about a few, but if you can just lay out the different the landscape of modeling and yeah. Please
See,
go ahead.
scenario building is the most important part of any modeling exercise, because see, we cannot just stick to one assumption and then give the results accordingly. One thing which I would like to mention here is that the studies and assumptions should be unbiased. I have seen so many studies which has some bias or the other. If they want to promote some kind of technology, they just make assumptions in such a manner that you get lot of that technology in the results. So of course there is a lot of difference of opinion on the assumptions. See, on battery energy storage cost, if I want to take example, the cost projections given by various agencies are so drastic that people don't take it seriously. They say that it's not, it is on a paper. So we need to create lot of scenarios where the uncertainties are captured properly, like battery cost scenario. So we should try to make some scenarios which are basically uh, keeping in view the practicalities of the things in the, like in India. We just can't assume that all the plants or coal plants will run at full load. Whatever, even if their capacity is 500, most of the plants may not go up to 500 megawatt. So these kind of things we have to take care while we are making scenarios. And it should be a practical scenario, like gas. People are making a lot of scenarios where gas, they are using imported gas. But in practicality, there is no, I understand that there is no long-term PPAs available for gas contracts. So not PPA, sorry, long-term gas contracts are available at that price. So just making a scenario where you don't find that kind of gas price in 2930 makes no sense. So that is my main point, that assumptions should be practical. It should not be your ambition, and it should be unbiased. And the number of scenarios should be limited. See, if you have so many options at your go, then it's very difficult for policymakers to decide which scenario is good. And it should be regularly modified at regular interval, because things are changing so fast. And as Mr. Meghani said, that we should try to find out its utility for 25 years. But I don't know whether that is possible in this scenario, where every day we are hearing a new technology in battery itself. Battery, nobody was able to see batteries in near future, but now people are started talking about it, and people are going ahead with their battery installations like that. So we need to regularly update these studies, and scenarios should be realistic. We cannot have just one scenario saying 175 gigawatt of renewables will come. We can have 150, 125, depending on the path. You can decide which scenarios we can select. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. It is an important point that how is modeling actually used, especially if there are multiple modeling exercises, how do you compare them? In this context, I just wanted to mention that NITI Aayog has started convening an India Energy Modeling Forum, where different models are the results from different models will be compared on the questions that are of importance to the policymakers. So that I hope that sort of a process happens for basically power system modeling as well. So in that sense, actually defining the assumptions and the inputs beforehand with sufficient stakeholder consultation, as was mentioned earlier, is an extremely important exercise before before sort of the regulators or different actors get into the modeling exercises. Otherwise, there is the issue of vested interest, as you had mentioned. Also, with respect to a comment that was made earlier, there are different types of models we talked about capacity expansion and production cost. But one thing that was mentioned was citing of RE projects. In that regard, I think Ranjit, for example, has worked on a tool called Map RE, which probably can help with that. Maybe Ranjit can make a comment about that at some point later. Moving on to a slightly different,
Yes.
again, sorry, was someone saying something?
Yeah, I just want to add
Yeah.
one thing, that
Yes.
as you talked about the assumption, should be parity. CA has taken an initiative under Indo-Denmark collaboration, where we are trying to develop technology catalog, wherein all the assumptions which goes into a planning studies can be collated and with the stakeholders involved in that, so that everybody who is doing modeling exercises can take that input as a base input, and then do the modeling, so that it is much easier for us to compare between the models, because when we have different assumptions, it is very difficult to compare the modeling results. So we are trying to build up that technology catalog. Maybe in a year's time, we will have that, and it will have all the technologies which are there for power generation. Initially, we are doing it for power generation only. And based on that, we will try to involve all the stakeholders in that, so that there is a agreement in the this thing. And we are trying to engage manufacturers, modelers, and hopefully we are having a workshop on 9th of December, wherein all the stakeholders will be involved, and we'll try to finalize the assumptions, basically what all assumptions we should take while doing modeling.
That's a great initiative. I think apart from the inputs, there is also the aspect of comparing results across different models, because they might have different ways of representing the results. So that also might be an important thing to sort of determine before the modeling sort of exercise begins. Yeah.
I have one suggestion. Sir, whenever a critical event happens, like demand side COVID happened, or supply side suddenly price dropped by 15%. So our planner should be fast enough, saying in within 15 days or 1 month, we should come up with a provisional report that how this critical event is going to affect my projection in next 2-3 years. If it is not happen, then the event's impact will not be captured in planning and operation process. So, like Terry has done the COVID study. What should happen? Whatever demand projection he has taken, if I am agree with that, I should just put them in my CA model and see how the projection of flexibility of 2029-30 scenario can happen. It will take me 15 days. Similarly, yesterday price dropped by 15%. Earlier, I was assuming 5% drop per year. So these type of critical event can be given in a 2-pager only, that it is a provisional report, so that the people are having a alert flag is that now I have to pause and rethink again.
Yes, thank you. Just moving on a little bit to a different aspect, which Mr. Narasimhan had mentioned during his opening remarks, which is on the demand side. Of course, with increasing variability in supply, RE, the wind and solar variability, that is well appreciated, but also the demand side contributes significantly to the complexity of this balancing and the planning, and also to be able to sort of look into the future beyond, say, the next few years. How can, especially with respect to demand forecasts not being available in a more, I mean, as robust manner as we would want, how do we actually take into account some of these uncertainties in when doing these sort of modeling exercises or projections? This is a question for Mr. Narasimhan. If you can please elaborate on this a little bit.
Yeah, actually, on this forecast errors would be there, be it for demand or be it for wind and solar forecasts. And generally, we get it right on a fair weather day. There's not much of a forecast error. It's only during transition. Like for instance, we have now this cyclone Nivar, which is about to hit the Tamil Nadu coast tomorrow. So there'll be lot many, we have errors on both sides, because there are some extraneous factors like the distribution feeders also getting switched off, that makes the whole thing. So on those days, we have to definitely have more of down reserves, regulation down margins should be much higher for those days, or you have, so that's generally, quite difficult to handle. But similarly, like in the summers and when winters, when we have rainfall, that time also there is a demand reduction. So those are the times generally when the forecast errors um, are much higher, and we have, different SLDCs, and at RLDC level, we are trying to factor in the weather also to the extent possible. But nevertheless, there would be errors on those transition days. But generally on most of the days, like if there's no change in the weather pattern, then generally we do get, in fact, September month, we had the best frequency profile, and that was essentially because, like even the forecast errors were quite good. And now people have the real-time market also to make up for any errors in the demand forecast or the wind and solar. So these are there to stay, but it's an area where more and more of work is required, especially with artificial intelligence and machine learning. So it's an ongoing process. You can't, one would learn with the passage of time. Similarly, for wind and solar also, we have the renewable energy management centers where they're getting data from 3 forecast service providers. Okay, and we have our own internal forecast tool also. So now with the passage of time, definitely, as more and more data gets into the system, the forecast errors would definitely reduce. But yes, there would be certain days of high forecast error, and for which you need to have more reserves. That's it.
One follow-up question.
Sorry,
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sherry, if I can just come in on
yes,
this.
yes,
This is a very
please do.
important point on the demand forecast, and we've been talking about it for quite some time, particularly from the regulatory perspective as well. Beyond just a demand forecast, the load research activity, and to that extent, in fact, Bureau of Energy Efficiency through ESL and have undertaken a very comprehensive state level load research project, load surveys and load research at the state level across, I think, more than 17, 18 states. We ourselves have done it for 3, 4 states. But the outcome of that load research process, that is contribution by the each individual different, RCI and agriculture, and contribution by the load at different seasons, at different geographies, that exercise itself would further, would add to the entire demand forecasting exercise. Similarly, POSOCO has done a very comprehensive 10-year analysis of demand analysis, and that gives a huge insights. But all this input to feed into the planning, modeling exercise, we have to actually have that bridge between this load research as well as the other demand forecasting analysis which has been undertaken. How that could fit into the planning exercise? I think that is where is a disconnect. I feel.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll also like to add.
Just one thing. All my observations were limited to the short-term load forecasting. Of course, as Ajit said, if you're talking about a longer time horizon, there are a lot many variables. Like we don't know. Like recently, this announcement on using induction stoves.
Right.
If it spreads out, then you would have a huge spike in the morning peak demand, which would be more difficult to handle, so that's something which we have also requested CA also to, really study this, so that we don't end up into a problem, because that peak you have to meet only with storage, or, would stress the system, very poor load factor loads if they get added. So these are, if we're talking something about long term, then these would be some of the issues, the load shape, how it would change over the years. That's so short-term load forecasting, whatever I said, that's there.
Yes.
See, I just want to add one thing, that CA is doing load forecasting, demand forecasting through electric power survey. Yes, I agree that there was some huge difference between the actual and the projected in 18th EPS. But in 19th EPS, it is a fairly accurate demand forecasting. And we have decided that we will be, instead of publishing EPS every 5 years, we will be doing midterm review of EPS. And on that pretext, we have already carried out a study with the KPMG, which has brought out the demand projections recently, and which has not changed much. And it was based on some other scientific study. Demand projection is one of the most complex things, and as what is happening is that you can make demand projections only when you can see the future properly. But every year, every 2 years, we find that there is a new scheme, like Mr. Narasimhan said about the induction cooker. So these need to be for long-term projections. These such announcements can make our projections haywire. So we need to have more regular load forecasting studies by which we can basically modify or update these demand forecasts. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Just moving track a little bit, Ajit, I really liked your 4 Ps, especially the participation build. And picking up on that, I had a question on, how can states be further incentivized to make greater use of modeling exercises, especially for, long-term capacity planning? As Mr. Menghani said, many a time very simplistic Excel models are used and you can project a state to be surplus or deficit, but there is increasing uncertainty in demand due to sales migration. And the older truism that, discom demand is equal to state demand, that is no longer true. In fact, a lot of states are giving up their central quotas and surrendering them. So what do you think, how can states be incentivized? Is it a lack of capacity, as Mr. Menghani said, or availability of tools? Hopefully that is no longer the case with GridPath open source available. So could you elaborate on how states can be incentivized to take this up more seriously?
Can I answer that question?
I would
Praveen?
Ajit to start, and then
Yeah.
Mr. you can supplement.
Okay.
Okay, I've been taking off from this, particularly the sales forecast and demand forecast exercise. The entire MYT framework, the sales projections is considered as completely uncontrollable factor when it comes to a truing up exercise. So if you have had, the fairly good comprehensive modeling tool which is available, and then try and understand also the implications of that in terms of utilities power purchase cost vis-a-vis sales forecast, one could actually design the slowly move from the uncontrollable part to the controllable part, as we are talking about, with more and more surplus power into the grid. So it's a better planning in terms of cost optimization, as well as, so you can devise, since your question is about incentive part, you could actually have a moderated, incentive framework to be introduced, linked to a controllable and uncontrollable parameters to that extent. That is one part. The second part is also on the at the state level, where the grid coordination committees are operational. A wider participation of the stakeholders in this exercise would also help the entire process.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Gupta.
Yeah, I have been working with lot of states in these modeling and capacity expansion plans. And what I find is that many of them are using still the Excel format, which they use to find out the demand supply gap. But because of this renewable energy penetration, these Excel formats are no longer valid for any long-term expansion plan. The only thing which is lacking is basically the tool, which is not available to them, these kind of modeling tools. Although I find that GridPath and Balmoral are open source modeling, but you need a solver to solve these, and that also costs a lot. So but it's not where you cannot say that they are all free, because you need a solver. I don't know about the GridPath, but for other model which are open source, you need a solver which costs a lot of money. And also the hardware requirement is also very large, because otherwise you won't get the results in just a few days. It will take months to get the output out of that. The second point is the capacity building. Capacity building on the modeling tool is required. Otherwise, I think that the power procurement cells at each state are having very good people who are having very good knowledge about how to plan. And I have my own experience that they have been working very hard. Only thing is that they are not aware of these tools and some limitations of the data requirement, because the data which is required by many tools is not available, and they are not in a position to assume those values in absence of actual values. And as Mr. Arjit said that the load curve and load projections are very important in this exercise, and because of lack of data, sub-sectorial wise data is not available. So if they want to do any scenario with agriculture load shift or industrial load shift, they are not in a position, even we are not in a position to clearly state that if in case we shift the agriculture load from night time or to daytime, how much savings we can have. We are just making all the assumptions that this much may be the agriculture load. So to promote that, I think we have to introduce states with a small model which can do at least the long-term capacity expansion planning, not very complex, so that they can get the results maybe in a day's time. So because to generate interest in any model is very much required at the state level. See, I have been working on this model since last 3 years, and we have been so patient that our model used to give results after 7 days, and then we find that this input was wrong, as I mentioned earlier. So you have to generate interest in the power procurement cells of states, so that they, and you have to tell them these are the advantages, and you can save a lot of money if you do these kind of studies. So
Yeah.
that's all.
I want to share one practical experience. You have to show them value in data and forecasting. I have provided them one end-to-end solution. It's an external agency. We prepared a optimum power procurement plan. For good forecasting in that plan, I was needed that from each 33 kV substation, data should come. So Telangana invested in that part. And after that, I have taken over. Not only the software, all the hardware has been provided at the Central Electricity Authority. And the server provided for that is much better than my planning division server. That can be assessed, and the weather data is coming from weather department every day. And that data is taken by Telangana for making their load forecasting and their power procurement decision. And within a day, they realize that whatever investment they did in data collection, that has been realized within 15 days. So we have to show them value from end-to-end solution need to provide. What is happening? We just give them one tool and consultant run away after 3 years. And they are having no use of that. So it is a hand-holding exercise which we have done for Telangana, and it is showing very good result. And I am saying my resources are underutilized. More state can be incorporated. Small incremental investment is added into that system. It has a very comprehensive load forecasting and power procurement optimization plan based on open source. It is available. So showing the value in data and forecast in terms of optimization or saving in power procurement, because they have to show their bosses that by doing that much effort, I am saving that much money. Then only they will allow. So this should be exercised from central or federal level. Instead of a theory only, we should do them practical help, which the CA is doing.
Thank you, Mr. Mengali. Just a follow-up to maybe Ajit or Mr. Narasimhan. We saw that the states and central plans sometimes do not reconcile. So, what kind of additional checks and balances can be put in place to integrate or to reconcile the state level decisions and the national plans?
No, actually, there are two aspects to this. One is on the generation resource adequacy. So there definitely each state can independently do their exercise on a 2 to 3 year ahead basis. Only thing is when it comes to resource adequacy, in fact, if you look at the reports, daily reports that we put out on our website, it has a diversity factor also, like, so if you look at the countrywide diversity, there is a good amount of at least 7 to 8% diversity is there on a daily basis. So it's not as if when a state talks about resource adequacy or a DISCOM talks about, it needs to ensure 100% resource adequacy. They could still leave a short 8 to 10%, which could be made up through the energy market later on, So that is how, and then the aggregation can happen at the state level, at the regional level, and then finally at the national level. Okay, that is as far as the uh, generation resource is concerned. On the transmission also, we need to do a similar exercise, in the sense that um, whether it is CTU and CA who do the planning, they need to ensure that all the inputs from the states, that is factored in the model. If you're doing a study for 2025, you must have at least 16 cardinal points for the entire year, for which you must have a file which is, the input file, which is, pakka, and that should contain, and all this essentially, there is the gap which is presently taking place, like you, Ranjit, mentioned the production cost modeling. And after that, there is a wall, the power flow studies and the stability studies are generally done by the transmission planning engineers, okay, and the operational planning engineers. Now the inputs for that power flow and this essentially has to come out of the production cost modeling. So these 16 snapshots which I mentioned, so 2025, it is up to CA and CTU that they should coordinate with all the STUs and have that snapshot, 16 snapshots, come out of this production cost modeling. Then only we would have a robust transmission plan. And otherwise, as there are concerns on overbuilding of the network, though I feel that's an issue which is quite, it's quite trivial really, because the 5 trillion rupees which I mentioned, out of that, interstate and intrastate transmission costs, the annual charges are just of the order of 70,000 crores. Okay, so in that, but even within that, we should ensure that we have a robust transmission system. So that's on the transmission side.
Yeah. Ashwin, can I come in? Yeah, so just building on what Narsimji just mentioned, maybe one element of, possibly this differences or discrepancy, or so to say, the gap between the state and central level. One of the reasons could also be, and I'm not, it's a hypothesis, we need to really again test that, is whether the common set of data, is being used for the purpose of this planning exercise. So there was a discussion about, whether the information asymmetry like this, whether it can be needs to be first addressed, or that gap needs to be addressed. So whether national level database registry about the 16 snapshot that Narsimji just mentioned, as well as also about the transmission network, or the new expansion, or the new plan, new capacity addition that has been factored in what exercise versus what state has assumed, or maybe they have considered but at the different time scale. Okay, so this is what, whether that kind of a national level data registry would possibly try and handle or address, so to speak, at least input based, these information asymmetry issues to begin with. There was, I believe, at the CRC, the planning regulations has a mention or a reference to that. But I'd like to understand actually the status, or what is the priority. Maybe I'm just putting the ball into the court in that sense.
Yeah, thanks, Sajid. We'll do one last question before we'll request all the panelists for closing comments. We have around 12 minutes left. We've seen from various modeling studies, the growing importance of storage. So maybe Mr. Menghani can answer this briefly. How are regulators looking at providing incentive structures or regulatory framework so that storage can come along as is needed for the various services that it can provide to the power sector?
Actually, regulator has a very little tool available to go beyond what CA is suggesting. But what CA is planning, or flexibility study is suggesting, storage is not clearly visible down the line. But we are also favoring that the people should not wait for only from the planning side. Some market signal should be available. And for that market signal, different type of ancillary product in the market, that only regulator can do. So from the regulatory side and tertiary mechanism, some market mechanism for faster ancillary support can initiate an exercise for the storage coming. And storage, we are not only limiting to the battery storage, all type of energy storage are being considered. so that no particular technology is favored or disfavored by regulatory action. But from CA side, what we want is support for annual path. It should be available not only the terminal year 27, we are saying storage. Storage can benefit in a different type of like transmission difference service or energy storage shifting. Different type of product by using a same storage can be there because we are already facing transmission planning issue in certain locations. So storage can be handy by providing me a temporary solution. Japan is already doing this type of thing. Instead of building full transmission, they are deferring it by installing movable storage. So from regulatory side, not much tools are available. So from ancillary side, we are trying to get an entry point for the storage.
Thank you, Mr. Mengani. So just before I come to closing comments, Mr. Suni had made some comments in the chat box. Can I request him to briefly make his comments here?
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, thank you for these 2 days of enriching. I was completely absorbed. I haven't seen such a session, such a rich session. I can feel the amount of effort which has gone in making it. So thanks to the team. I have only a couple of issues to make. Most of the things have already been mentioned by the panelists, and it will be more of a repetition. But the point being made is that we need to ramp up our soft capabilities in India. We are investing a lot, but not investing in the skill sets. That's the first point. The second issue is that the data part of it. We are talking about data, but there is no regulation. Time series data is a serious matter. What should go in open access? What should go into restricted data or confidential data? There has to be a mandate for it, and there has to be a single source of truth. That's the other point. Third is we need multiple studies. Even for our positioning, we take satellite 3 signals, do triangularization, and find out our position. How can there be one study only forecast by CA, and then we say that we went wrong? That's something has to go. Everything, at least 3 studies must be. Without 3 quotations, we don't buy anything. So we must have 3 studies for everything. The other point I would say is I had a lot of questions on duals and sensitivity and marginals. How do I get a confidence? Somebody said about black box, that how do I get confidence that the results which this program is showing is correct? So we need more and more of that, but that's not the point here. The point is, how do we make this whole process sustainable? How do we build institution? How do we bring in diligence, rigor, the skill set, and the capacity building, which is being talked about? All of us know about it, but for the last 1 decade, efforts have been made, but it has not translated into things. Scratching the surface, sprinkling the terminologies, picking up something from some seminar and using it in another seminar, that won't do. We need long-term commitments, black belt planners who are living and breathing planning and data. That is not coming up. So we need certified planners. It's so sad to see that the planning regulation is in limbo. What worse could one think of? It took a decade to bring a regulation, and now another decade is gone that there is no action on it. So unless we are serious about building institutions, sustainable institutions, none of these things would ultimately yield results to the end system. That's the point where I will end. I must thank the Ranjit and Dr. Anna. Pardon me for putting double N of Anna. I have a habit of re-emphasizing my points and putting double N and double E's. So, but through you, I would like to convey to the team which has worked so nicely. And I wish that states and center form a team, dig deep into the things, make it a habit and run it. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Suni. Your encouraging words, as always, we take a lot of inspiration from that. So we have 5 minutes left. Can I request the panelists to very briefly make closing remarks, probably just in 1 minute, I apologize for that. And we will be ending with Dr. Jay Asundi, who is the Executive Director of CSTEP. He will be making closing comments. So can I request in this order, Mr. Narasimhan, then Mr. Gupta, Mr. Menghani, Ajit, and then Anna and Ranjit. But please limit yourselves to 1 minute. Sorry for that.
Yeah, thanks, Ashwin. I'll just briefly touch the 2 points. One is that much was being mentioned about software and hardware. I would say that these are relatively easy. In fact, even hardware computing power, we have our own CDAC, where one could, they would also be able to give us those resources for cloud computing. And that is one. And software, of course, open source is there versus licensed software. Both have their advantages and disadvantages, because in industry, one would look for a support system. Whenever any open source software is there, the fear is that would I get the requisite support? And of course, Dr. Anna and others have assured that there would be a support available. But then there are different open source software. Then how do we talk about some utilities may work on another software? We should talk about data portability in a seamless fashion across different software. That will become very important if we have to embrace this open source software. And of course, people are the key, as Mr. Suni also mentioned. And I think that's about all what I would like to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gupta.
Yeah, I must congratulate the team of GridPath. I think it is excellent software, and many of the things which we were struggling in our present model have been taken care of in this GridPath. And we would like to interact more on this because we are using modeling every day in various studies. And yes, the capacity building is very important, and we are trying to involve states, and many programs are being launched during this year where we are trying to build the capacity of state agencies, like we have already done for MP, for Rajasthan, and lot of programs are being carried out to tell them what modeling actually can, how they can get help from modeling studies. And yes, of course, there are many issues regarding the assumptions, which we are trying to solve through various workshops, technology catalog, and data availability. Of course, data is available. CA has all the data which is already public, but maybe it is not in the format which modelers are required. Maybe soft copy is not available. But every data, all the data which we have used in optimal generation mix studies is available, and whatever data was not available has been included in the report. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Mr. Menghani.
Actually, I am a great believer in open source because my past interaction in Python community, etc., told me that all these efforts are being supported by young community, and they are more cooperative and transparent in sharing the data so that they all can grow together. So I will complete this seminar with a statement: to accomplish great things, we must not only act, but also dream, not only plan, but also believe. So I have a firm belief in the team of Prayas, Ranjit, and Anna that we can create a new community of planner in India, even through our own informal roles also. And by the end of the year, at least 30 people will be there which will be using this software for the state also. So this is my promise. I will use all my strength in all my open platform to achieve this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Menghani, for that support. We count on that. Ajit?
Yeah, so utility of any tool is only when it is put to use as many number of times. And to that extent, the regulators can play a very important role. And as what Mr. Menghani has already, extended support. But at the state level as well, the regulators need to actually, start demanding this kind of evidence-based, mathematical model-based, decision-making Now there is an opportunity because the grid code is under review at many places. We had the grid codes of 2005 and 6 in many states. The CRC is already contemplating the new grid code, so through which they could actually mandate the planners to put this studies in the public domain and demand use of such tools. So the Maharashtra grid code recently notified has certain provisions to that effect. I think many states could also follow similar and demand more from the planners and the other users.
Yes.
And thank you and compliments to your team once again.
Thanks, Ajit. We hope more states take that up. Anna, you want to go next? Ranjit.
I can go. I just want to first once again mention our third team member here on the Blue Marble side. Garrett Demore, who also greatly contributed to the development of the platform. I'll just say, a lot of effort has certainly gone into the development of GridPath. But in many ways, that was sort of the easy part. The hard part starts like now, because it only has value if it's used. Open source software is about community. So I think, we are very much going to be kind of refocusing on, that capacity building, how to sort of find support for growing and nurturing a community of users and developers.
Thanks, Anna. Ranjit?
Well, Anna stole my points. But I just want to thank all the panelists. Like, it's been such an enriching conversation to just hear all the issues that you've been grappling with. And it's not that GridPath is going to solve all these issues, but at least we can contribute in some small way to address these issues. And as Anna mentioned, this is just the first step, making an open source software where we can develop these open source databases, have transparency, build a community, and as a community sort of have a robust electricity system development, not just within India, but across the world. Like that's our dream. So we can have consumers win and the environment win. So that's the larger vision. So this is just one step in that direction, and we are looking forward to partner with each and every one of you. And I also want to thank the audience to stick around for 2 days. We really appreciate it. So thank you.
Thanks, Ranjit. Over to you, Jai, for your concluding and closing remarks.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So good afternoon, everyone. I know it is really odd that I have not attended any of your sessions, but I have come in at the last time, and this is the classical case of somebody passing me the hot potato and figuring out now what do I do with it. So let me just take a couple of minutes. First of all, I'm very happy to hear that we have finally got to the point where we are able to release the tool to the broader public. I have always been a fan of open source software. If anyone tries to search for my name and finds publications in open source software, don't be surprised. It was my past life. The point that I would like to make here is that I think 4 years ago, when we were starting to think about some of these issues, and I think Prayas went down that path of saying, let's try FlexSource. We at CSTEP have always felt that that was not probably the right way to go about it. There was too much closeness. I mean, it was not easy to understand. We felt that it is important that as researchers and people who are also working in this area, there has to be sufficient transparency in the tools that we are using, because we need to know why we are getting the results that we are getting. And that's very important. And I think I'm very happy that Ranjit, Anna, and the entire Blue Marble team came in and said, you know what, we know what FlexSource is, we could do better than that. And this is what we should do. And I'm really happy that CSTEP and Prayas actually got together and worked on 2 live projects simultaneously too, which is a very important thing, because it's not just about putting out the tool, but also showing that it can be used for a practical example and be used in real. So in that sense, I am very happy. And I say this in every webinar that I attend these days. This is just the beginning. Clearly, there is a long way to go. But I do see great value in what Anna also said, is that how can we now take this tool, support it for the entities that need it, and continue to support. I think there was a comment earlier about what happens to open source? I mean, who will support it? And that's why people are not very keen on that. But I think from my research, what I have found is that if you have a couple of champions, and I can see the champions on the screen right now with Blue Marble, Prayas, and ourselves, we can definitely support this tool and take it to the point where it becomes du jour. I don't think anyone talks about Linux being a non-supported piece of software, or even Apache being a non-supported piece of software. So from that perspective, I feel that there is a lot of value that we can provide, not just in terms of the platform, but also in terms of making sure that it can be applied to the right cases, take it to the various places. The next big step, I feel, is taking it to colleges, where students can now use this tool and trying and applying it to various places. And I'm happy also that you guys have all created data sets that can be used, and that is really good. So without stating the obvious, this is a fantastic exercise. I think it's great. It's a milestone for us. And so the last pitch I would like to make is for all the agencies out there. I hope you've heard what various people here from the Central Electricity Regulation Authority as well as POSOCO and everyone talked about, is that this needs to be supported. It's a great effort. Let us see how we can get more support for this going forward, so that we have a robust set of people working on this tool into the future. And that is the only way it will get better and be used more. So with those remarks, thank you again for Prayas for organizing this. This is great. Thanks Ranjit, Anna, for being the rock in this turbulent sea of development and taking this forward. And with that, congratulations to everyone. I'm very happy that we've been able to do what we've been doing, but I'm looking forward to the next year and how we take this forward to more states, more places, and making it the tool that is used in India. No one should talk about anything else but grid path, right? So that's our goal right now. Okay, so over to Ashwin. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Jay. I really hope we can see a future where this is used very extensively, not just by students, academics, research institutes, but also by policymakers and the regulators. Just to end, this journey began 2 years ago. Firstly and foremostly, I would like to thank Ranjit, Anna, and Gerrit, part of Blue Marble, who really took a lot of time, effort, attended so many calls, workshops, and finally we've been able to launch GridPath. So congratulations to you as well, and thank you for all the support, to CSTEP as well. The three of us were there in this. And once again, thank you for all the four panelists, Mr. Narasimhan, Mr. Menghani, Mr. Gupta, and Ajit, for giving your time and really enriching this discussion, answering a lot of these questions. Over 100 participants for something as technical and complex as power sector modeling really shows that this is needed. And I am very inspired and very hopeful. As Mr. Suni said, you can sense the energy, and I'm sure this will be taken to newer heights. So thank you once again. And we will be putting up the recordings and the slides on our website tomorrow. So please feel free to share them. And we'll certainly be even putting out our model and some of the data for public use later on. So thank you once again.
Ashwin, I think it will be remiss of us to not mention the support of the Hewlett Foundation and the SIF Foundation also for supporting this work. And also, I think, a regulatory assistance project in standing behind and being part of this journey. I hope more such entities join us and take this work forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Jai, and bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.